you're heading to the magical NC500s for the very first time, there are 7 mistakes you really need to avoid making. In this video, I'll be explaining exactly what they are and how to avoid them. So hello, if you're new here, my name's Robbie. I'm a travel guide writer, and I've actually had the pleasure of travelling around the NC500 multiple times over the last few years whilst researching and writing my North Coast 500 guidebook. And yeah, if you're wondering, that's me slipping on a rock underneath a waterfall on the NC500. That's a mistake you probably want to avoid. Anyway, you might want to subscribe if you own a campervan or a motorhome, or if you just love road trips in the UK and Europe. But please don't be put off if this is actually the first time you'll be driving up in the Scottish Highlands. It's all going to be worth it. And believe me when I say the North Coast 500 really is the road trip of a lifetime. So I'm here to point you in the right direction. So stick around to the end of the video.
Let's get into it. The first mistake to avoid is using postcodes for navigation. Now please trust me with this one. Go and use Google Maps and what free words to navigate around the NC500. It'll get you exactly where you need to go. Now the Highlands is a vast location and postcodes don't always point you in the correct direction. You may be a mile or two away from the place you're trying to actually find. So if you use Google Maps, you can actually download it for offline use even when the phone reception or your phone signal doesn't work, which can happen in certain places across the Highlands. So avoid getting lost and trust me, use Google Maps and what free words. Mistake number 2 to avoid on the NC500 is don't go and do it last minute in the summer. Now campsites, hotels and restaurants are definitely going to be fully booked during the summer months, causing you stress, hassle, a lot of wasted money and potentially a very long drive all the way up to the Scottish Highlands. And yeah, you're not going to be able to find somewhere to camp or a hotel, that sort of thing. So if you are planning on going in the summer months, especially in the school 6 weeks holidays, which tends to be the last 2 weeks of July and the whole of August, definitely book ahead or avoid these dates if you are looking to do something a bit more spontaneous. Number 3, don't drive the NC500 in a clockwise direction. Now if you've done any research into the NC500, you'll probably hear the words clockwise and anti-clockwise mentioned quite a bit. Now this is the driving direction that you're going to actually do the route. So my top tip would be to drive it anti-clockwise instead. The scenery will become more and more dramatic. It's going to end with a huge memorable crescendo along the west coast where you're going to see huge mountains, vast lochs and some absolutely stunning coastline. You'll start off on the east coast, which is beautiful in its own right, but from there the scenery along the north and the west coast just gets better and better.
Now before we get into the really crucial top 4 mistakes to avoid on the NC500, I'm going to pinch 30 seconds of your time to tell you about my North Coast 500 guidebook. Now this guidebook is actually an Amazon bestseller and it was seen in the Guardian and the Sunday Times. It contains all of the must-see locations, and what's pretty unique about my book is that all of the must-see locations come with a QR code and a what free words reference, making them simple and easy to find when you're doing your own road trip. Of course, it includes everything you're going to need, from campsites to hotels, B&Bs to Airbnbs, the stress-saving hacks. There's a lot of tips that are going to save you time and money. And yeah, it pretty much has absolutely everything you're going to need for a magical North Coast 500 trip. So yeah, thanks for listening to the waffle. Hopefully I kept that short and sweet. You can go and get the guidebook from my website, which is robbieroams.com. Now let's get back into it.
So the next mistake to avoid is number 4. Don't park in passing places around the route. So the NC500 does feature quite a bit of single track road, and along the single track road there are passing places that not only allow both sides of the traffic to pass, but it also allows people to overtake. So if you're in a motorhome or a caravan, you can actually pull into a passing place and let people behind you go past. But yeah, definitely do not park in a passing place. You're going to create a load of traffic, you're going to annoy some of the locals who are just going about their day and potentially create a dangerous situation. So please only use the designated lay-bys and car parks if you do want to pull over. Mistake number 5, don't rush the NC500. Now I want to set the record straight with this. I see a lot of people in car clubs and motorbikers who are trying to make it into some form of a race. But trust me, you're not going to win a medal for completing it in a couple of days. The NC500 is a magical experience that you really want to savour. And let's be honest, most of you are driving quite a long way to get up there. So my top tip is to allow at least 5 days to complete the route. And by the way, that doesn't include the time to travel up there and back, which for most of us is around a day up and a day back. So please don't rush the experience. Take in the magnificent views of the Scottish Highland and definitely don't rush it. Mistake number 6 to avoid is driving the Drumbeck Loop or the Bealach Bar, also known as the Applecross Pass, in a larger motorhome. So if you do own a motorhome, anything really over 6.5 to 7 meters is probably going to struggle on either of these roads. so it's definitely best to avoid them. Other than that, most of the roads are absolutely fine in a larger motorhome, but these two routes in particular are probably going to cause you a few issues. And finally, the last and probably the most important mistake to avoid making on the NC500 is don't travel without a plan. Now there's so much to see, do and experience in this wonderful part of Scotland, so go ahead and watch some YouTube videos, perhaps read a guidebook, and definitely make a plan. You're going to thank me for this one later. I know it sounds really obvious, but there are people who actually go up to the NC500, they're not aware of all the amazing must-see locations, and they end up skipping quite a few of the beaches, the castles, the waterfalls. Like, imagine driving for 8-9 hours from England or Wales up to Scotland and then not actually seeing most of the must-see locations. To me, it's absolutely crazy. So make a plan, spend a little bit of time on Google, read through your guidebook, and even go to the lengths of making an itinerary, planning where you're going to eat. Definitely plan and book your campsites or hotels in advance if possible, and by planning ahead you're going to go up there with a much more relaxed attitude, and you're just going to be able to enjoy the experience.
So there we have it, 7 mistakes to avoid on your North Coast 500 road trip. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please consider hitting the subscribe button, turning notifications on. If you actually have a little look around my YouTube channel, you'll find tons of North Coast 500 videos. I think I've probably made upwards of 10, 12, something like that. Go and check me out on Instagram at Robbie Roams, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. See you later.